sign of leadership is inclusion and acceptance and tolerance. I think I have good leadership skills in some aspects and probably obviously some I need to work on. But for me, I think the most important leadership quality that at least I would like to emanate to people is example, is out there. Listen, I'm the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace. That doesn't mean that I'm not out there sanding and drilling and getting dusty and dirty and sweaty like the rest of them. That's just who I am. And I think people respect that. And when you respect someone, then you're more open to listen to what they have to say, what they have to teach. And as a leader, if you want better performance out of your employees, out of yourself, out of your company, right? You need to learn to inspire people to bring passion into their lives, because passion brings purpose.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script, but you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Jessy James, and today's guest is Luke Mickelson. Luke is the founder of Sleep in Heavenly Peace, a global nonprofit dedicated to one simple mission: no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. What began in 2012 with a single bunk bed built in his garage has grown into a worldwide movement with more than 400 chapters, delivering hundreds of thousands of beds to children in need. A 2018 CNN hero and a sought-after keynote speaker, Luke champions a humans helping humans philosophy, inspiring communities to take small, meaningful actions that create lasting impact. His work restores dignity, comfort, and hope. One bed, one family, one town at a time. Luke, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Well, Jessy, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Wonderful. Luke, I'm curious, who is someone from your early life or even an early experience that shaped the leader that you are today?
You know, that's a long story. A lot of people, to be honest with you. You know, I grew up in a single parent home, right? So, you know, my dad wasn't really in the picture. So of course, my first hero was my mom. She taught me the value of service and hard work, right? You know, when you're a single mom with 5 kids, you know, you don't know anything else. But I also had the pleasure and joy of having multiple dads. And what I mean by that is I played a lot of sports. So all my coaches, you know, that valued me and I valued them, I learned a lot from each one of them. You know, sports, if anything, teaches you a lot, you know, dedication, hard work, commitment, you know, teamwork, things of that nature that, you know, later on in life, you know, as a teenager, you don't recognize, but later on in life, boy, you can look back and recognize, oh, that coach or that athletic director, even that player, that mentor, they taught me that, right? So some of the best advice, I served a mission for my church. My mission president, amazing man, love him to death, him, his wife. You know, he taught me one of the most valuable lessons that I've taken throughout my life. And that's, if you never want to work a day in your life, look at your career, your job, whatever it is, look at it as a form of serving others and service. And I've really tried to implement that. You know, when you have a hard day at work, and we all have them, you know, when you look at it at a way of serving others, boy, it doesn't seem as heavy and as hard. And so those have been really good mentors and philosophies that these, you know, dads and coaches have taught me through the years.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I can see how that impacted you, right? And I'm curious, how from so early on were you open to inputs, perspectives, experiences from these different kind of people?
You know, I was on a podcast a little while ago. They asked me kind of a similar question, like if you could go back and, you know, to your younger self, what would you tell yourself? What's the advice you'd give yourself? And I thought for a minute, I thought, the best advice is tell myself, listen, you don't know everything, and it's okay not to, right? In fact, it's not a sign of weakness. And what I mean by that is all of these coaches, all of these mentors that I had, they have great advice. And even people that I wouldn't quote, quote, classify as a mentor, they all had great advice. And often when I was that young, I saw it as a form of weakness, I guess, not knowing it. And so I acted like I knew it. And, we all do this to some degree. I wish I could go back and slap myself and say, listen, just listen to what they have to say, right? It's okay if you don't know. And that's I think good advice for anybody, because it isn't weakness when we don't know anything. And if someone has the answers or the experience that we can glean from, then you don't have to go through the troubles. I remember my mom told me, like I said, Luke, don't get a credit card, right? Any 19 to 25-year-old needs to listen to this, right? You don't get a credit card because it stacks up debt and you have to worry about all this. Well, you don't really learn that lesson. Maybe some do, but I didn't really learn that lesson until I had that sleepless night where I didn't know how I was going to pay the credit card bill. Those are the kind of things that you wish you'd just be able to glean from that advice before you had to go through the murky waters to learn it.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like you were such a sponge when you were young and continue to be, but there's some lessons that you just have to learn the hard way.
You just have, and maybe that's it. Maybe you just have to, you got a personality that says, what, I'm going to, and I will say, learning the lessons the hard way, I guess the silver lining behind that, Jessy, is, well, you're not going to forget it, because you learn it the hard way. And unfortunately, some of us have to do that. I think we get a little further along ahead in life when we can listen to our elders and understand that they probably have some good advice that we could listen to, but sometimes I guess we just have to learn the hard way.
What does true leadership mean to you? What from your perspective makes a true leader?
Well, I think someone that inspires, and I think inspires comes in many forms, example, is inspire the leader that's out there in the front lines, out there that's not afraid to do the small jobs or what might be considered the meaningless or unmeaningful jobs, whatever that word is. I think that's a sign of leadership. A sign of leadership is inclusion and acceptance and tolerance. These examples of trying to bring people together. I think I have good leadership skills in some aspects and probably obviously some I need to work on. But for me, I think the most important leadership quality that at least I would like to emanate to people is example, is out there. Listen, for like in my case, I'm the founder of Sleep and Emily Peace. That doesn't mean that I'm not out there sanding and drilling and getting dusty and dirty and sweaty like the rest of them, right? That's just who I am, and I think people respect that. And when you respect someone, right, then you're more open to listen to what they have to say, what they have to teach. And as a leader, and this is what I share in my keynote speeches and all that, when I talk to business leaders, listen, if you want better performance out of your employees, out of yourself, out of your company, right, you need to learn to inspire people to bring passion into their lives, because passion brings purpose, right? And when you have a passion and certainly a purpose about whatever it is you're doing, whatever you're selling, whatever service you're providing, whatever you're trying to teach, right? If you can bring that passion and purpose, eventually purpose, into those people's lives, you're going to get far more production out of them, right? And sometimes that happens when you just include them. You include them in the decision process. You include them in their ideas that they have. I think some of the biggest mistakes us leaders or managers or directors have is sometimes we think our way is the only way, right? And that's a dangerous road to walk. Not because things are going to turn ugly. No, just because you're maybe missing out on some really good ideas, number one. And number two, you're probably going to miss out on allowing your employees to feel included into your project or your company. If they feel like, hey, I helped build this, I'm a part of this, you're going to get far more passion out of them than if you just tell them what to do.
Can you share about a time when you realized that your way of leading or living no longer met the demands of your work and life and growth was needed?
Well, on a personal scale, absolutely. I think that's where Sleep in Heavenly Peace was born, to be honest with you. I think everybody goes through a period of time in their life. I was 35. Maybe it's maybe it's a midlife crisis, Jesse. I don't know. But we all go through these periods of time in our life where you kind of start asking a lot of, adult questions, like what is this life about? What is most meaningful to me? What is a sign of success? Right. And I know these things kind of change throughout the maturity and evolution of your leadership and corporate goals. Mine did too. Mid 35s. Number one, I grew up in a single parent home. And so you want to talk about a mom that wanted to make sure you get your education and get good grades so you get a good job and you're not suffering. And, her life was always working hard to try to provide for kids because we didn't have a lot of money. So that was, of course, her focus and measure of success for a lot of years. And so was mine. So I adapted that, carried it on. Well, when you get in the corporate world and you start having a family and kids and for me, I just kind of look back and go, I don't really care how many cars or four-wheelers or zeros behind my paycheck. That's not the success I care about anymore, right? What is it then? What now you have to kind of shift gears and go, what really is important to me? And to me, I look back and said, it's how is Luke Mickelson's life impacting the world today, right? And just the people around me today. When you start asking these questions, Jesse, and you don't get a lot of answers, right? It becomes very frustrating. It becomes almost depressing, right? You're especially for those successful people that they've always had a drive, they've always had a direction, they've always known the path to success. And when that path is now kind of murky or it's different, and you don't necessarily see clearly forward, that's a frustrating time for people like myself. And so going through this period of frustration, that's when I discovered that there were children sleeping on the floor. And which, okay, there's a lot of need out there in the world today, right? Not just children without beds, but for whatever reason, that really struck a chord with me. And it was a light, ignited flame in me that told me, okay, there's something here that is drawing a passion inside of me that I haven't felt maybe ever or for a long, long time. And so I think that was the biggest shift in me, is realizing that my measure of success is going to be different, and finding that measure of success, which is AKA the passion that I have now, can be a challenge for people. And I'm just dang lucky I found something that I'm very passionate.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And I'm curious, finding your passion, asking the question, how do I make the greatest impact on this world? And then finding your path. What did you have to outgrow or let go in order to kind of get there?
Oh, there's a lot. As a founder, right? You have what they call the build stage, what I call the build stage, where you're building your foundation, you're building this passion, whether it's a for or nonprofit company or a project or something you work on, a book, whatever it is, right? You're building your organization, if you will. Well, then you reach this level called identity infusion, right? And what that means is whatever project you're working on or corporation you're building, in my case is, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, you become one in the same person, right? Your identities fuse together, which is going to happen for people that are very passionate about whatever they're doing. You see this a lot in the nonprofit space, because nonprofits usually always start from a trauma or something happens personally and they want to solve that and they don't want to make sure it happens again to other people, whatever it is, right? You become very infused with this initiative that you've now taken on as a passion. Well, that requires a lot of sacrifice. In my case, there was a number of things. I was somewhat forced to quit my full-time job of almost 20 years, a business I made great money at, a business I was going to buy and have my retirement set. That was obviously a very big decision and big course change in my life. But it was both an easy and hard decision, because once you find that passion that creates the purpose for your life, little else matters. When I first delivered my first bed, Jesse, this 6-year-old child had never slept on a bed before. She'd only slept in the backseat of her mom's car. right? And when you walk into her room, when I walked into her room, she just got a house. Her parents, or her mom rather, just a single mom, just got a house. She was sleeping on her clothes. I looked in the corner and there's a pile of clothes there. I'd never seen that before. I never felt that. And so when you walk in, I thought I was just delivering a bed to a child that, she needed a bed. But when you start seeing that and you feel the emotional weight, and then you look over to mom, a single mom who's crying, and I was raised by a single mom too, right? So I know the pain, the guilt, the frustration of trying to provide for your family. You're doing the best you can. And unfortunately, something as common to you and I as a bed is a luxury for them, right? That you see that and you feel that and you realize, holy cow, this is way more than just a bed for a child. This is way more than just a good night's sleep, right? These are and for me, these are the passions that ignited in me. And listen, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. I love hunting. I love fishing. I love college football. I love all those things, those guy things, not just guy things, but those things, right? Growing up. And I kid you not, in that room, delivering the bed to little Haley, 35 years of passion for fishing and hunting and college football, in a split second, none of it mattered anymore to me, right?
Mhm.
That's what passion can do to you. That's what can literally change your heart and your focus and your purpose to something that now, to me, is more meaningful than any dollar I could ever get, right? And so, those are things that happens when you decide to follow these tiny moments that encourage you to go do something, go get off the couch, right? These
Yeah.
tiny moments, if you don't follow them, right? And we have excuses all the time. I'm too busy, or I don't know how to do that, or someone else is doing that, right? Or you want to start a business, right? How many times of leadership books and inspirational speeches you listen to try to get you motivated to do that? It's very simple. We all want to change. We all want to do good. We all have this desire of wanting better for ourselves and for our families. And we spend time listening to inspirational speeches and reading books and do all this. But it's really the second step that we don't spend a lot of time on. And that's the action. That's the desire to act. And when you go through what I was going through, internal struggle, who am I? What do I believe? What do I want to do? These are frustrating questions, especially when you don't have the answer, right? But when you find the answer, boy, you jump on that horse and ride it till it's done, right? And I think that's just where passion meets purpose, and purpose is meaning to life. I mean, really.
Love it. Yeah. And it almost seems like, as you said, listening to those tiny moments, it was such a big experience for you that action almost automatically followed.
And for me, it was sitting on the couch watching TV with my kids, right? We're watching Big Bang Theory back in the day. We had just delivered a bed, my very first bed I built with the Boy Scouts. I delivered it to a family. I didn't get to go on the delivery. The boys did, right? But I heard how amazing it was. But then as a dad, going through this internal frustration, this internal turmoil, right? And my kids, and this is right before Christmas, my kids see some Xbox commercial come on, and my son's like, "Dad, can we get another Xbox?" Right? And here I am sitting on the couch. I mean, put yourself in my shoes. You're sitting on the couch. You're struggling. What is most important in life? What am I supposed to do as a dad? How can I provide for my kids if I'm still wandering this kind of like this mist or fog, right? And then all of a sudden, and I just delivered a bed to a child that didn't have one. Now my kids who have a bed want an Xbox. We already have an Xbox. They don't need an Xbox. Why don't you appreciate what you have? I mean, all this noise and whatnot's going on in my brain. You're right. I just stood up. I mean, it was almost involuntary. I stood up, just started walking to the garage, and my kids said, "Dad, where are you going?" I said, "You know what? I got leftover wood. I'm going to build another bunk bed, and you're going to come and help me."
I love it. Yeah. What a powerful, teachable moment.
Absolutely. And that was my tiny moment. It wasn't, "Hey, let's build another bed for a child," because I didn't know that child bedlessness was a thing. I had solved the problem already. I had solved the one kid that I knew that needed a bed. But no, so I went out and built a bed with my kids because it was a tiny moment telling me that exact thing.
Yeah.
It's a teaching moment. It's something that I got from my parents and coaches and all those dads that I had. I can't miss out on that. But when you follow a tiny moment, listen, each tiny moment you follow, it's a practice. It's a practice of acting on that desire to change, not the wanting to desire, but the acting on, right? And listen, you might not change the world every time, but I promise you're going to change someone's world. And that someone might just be you. In fact, most of the time, it's probably just you that gets changed a little bit. But each one of those little changes, each one of those little practices on acting on that tiny moment, it only puts you in the position to find your true passion. Puts you in the position to score, if you want a sports analogy, right? You got to create those moments for yourself, and you got to practice those moments. And that's what practicing tiny moments and acting on them is all about.
Thinking about your journey over the past few years, what's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself for your own growth?
Oh, man, this is going to sound funny, but spending time to really reflect on me and my personal involvement. And what I mean by that, this is going to sound confusing. I'm sorry, but I think I know every founder, whether it's a for-profit company, nonprofit, a manager in an organization, whatever. When you build something as significant, well, anything, significant to you, I should say, when you build something and it grows, it's going to evolve. Eventually, it's going to evolve past you. That's a very hard thing for anybody that gets identity fused with whatever project or organization they create. And this is called founder syndrome. And I've really spoke about this a lot recently because it's something that's very difficult, very challenging for founders to go through. They don't even know they're going through it. I was no different just a year ago. I mean, I was going through something that was frustrating. It was difficult. I was feeling like I was getting pushed out of my own organization. I was disconnected from the passion I grew and have loved for 14 years that caused me to make all these changes to my life. I feel like I was getting disconnected to it, right? That's a hard, terrible feeling. You become very defensive, very controlling, very passionate, and you say things you shouldn't, you do things you shouldn't because you just feel like you're almost being attacked. And the reality is there's no attack there. There's no scheme or plot, right? It's just as businesses evolve, leadership evolves as well, but they evolve in a different way. They don't evolve together, right? So, your corporation, I tell startup companies and entrepreneurs all the time, listen, one of the best advice I'm going to give you before you even start your project, your organization, whatever, just realize it's not going to love you as much as you love it, right? Because a company doesn't have feelings, right? As it grows and more management is required and more employees, and as a nonprofit, a board is required, and it gets stronger and tighter and more policies and procedures that now you have to follow, and people come in and meetings happen without you, and then you're not included and you don't make these decisions anymore, blah, blah, blah. These are all great signs of growth, but they're also very small cuts and what I call relevance wounds to founders that don't and are not expecting it, right? And so for me and for all those founders out there, I'll just tell you my experience. And I think it's important because other founders that have and will go through this, some of their reactions are very poor to the point where they get kicked out of their own organization. Happens all the time, to the point where, there's suicide that happens because this is how serious and how mentally challenging it is. I'm just dang lucky, Jessy, that I've had great people in my organization, my wife, great people in my life that have been patient with me and has helped me realize, listen, this is not normally you. And so since it's not normal, and I had to reflect internally, I know this is not normally how I act. I know this is not normally how I think. These are good friends of mine. They're not so what's going on, right? What is going on? And to pause, one of the defenses I teach people is pause before you protect, right? Pause before you want to protect yourself, which means is just think about it for a minute. Just listen to yourself. Take some time. And it could be weeks before you respond, right? You just need to take some time and realize, what is it that I'm going through? What is it that I'm facing? Why are these feelings happening? Are they really real? So the biggest, I guess, the answer to your question in a long way is taking some internal perspective as a leader, especially a leader and a founder, to realize that you're going to be going through this, whether you want it or like it or not, in some level or degree. You're going to have the founder syndrome problem, and you need to realize that. Be proud of your success, be proud of your growth in your organization. It's grown beyond you, which is great. That's what we all want. Now you take on a different role. You take on a legacy role, not necessarily a builder role anymore, right? And so those have been some of the challenges, but fun and, quite frankly, rewarding challenges. Like every challenge, once you get past it, it's like a reward, right? It's been nice, and I really try to help other founders that are struggling.
What's your vision for your leadership, Luke, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead?
Yeah, boy, luckily it hasn't changed. Our mission statement for Sleep at Emily Peace is no kid sleeps on the floor in our town. We just want our town to be everybody's town. I knew a long time ago that this is much bigger than one man. It's much bigger than one town, one state, even one country. Because child bedlessness is so big and so unknown. It needs to get out there, it needs to get heard, and that's the only way it's going to get solved, right? And so my vision, my goal, and legacy is still the same, is to provide as many kids beds as I can. Now I've added a few things to that because I think going through this experience has taught me things that I think other people could glean from. Just like if I was back in telling my 20s, myself in the 20s, listen to people that have been through it, and I understand more. I would have not learned these lessons had I not gone through this experience, had I not grown a company to where I now experience something like founder syndrome, or what does legacy building mean versus organizational building, or business building. So I think those are lifelong lessons that I want to implement now in my legacy as I build beds and grow this organization, or be a part of the growth now of this organization. I can also maybe help other founders ease into their legacy roles now without having them lose connection with their very own mission and organization.
Curious, Luke, as your vision evolves, right? What are the ways that you feel you need to grow personally to develop and realize this evolving vision?
That's a great question. I think one of the hardest things, probably the hardest thing in life, Jessy, is just for us to learn how to be honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself, truly honest with yourself, then you can't be offended. You can't be hurt because you already know all this stuff about yourself, and you have confidence that is not arrogance. It's just confidence in who you are. You know your goods and you know your bads. You know your weaknesses and you know your strengths, and you're not afraid to share that with people. You're not afraid to share it with yourself. I think, for me anyways, I think the most important thing I try to learn every day is to overcome my fear of being honest with myself, and knowing and recognizing that, I have weaknesses, and that's okay. It's okay that I don't do this very well, and I don't do that, and I'm working on it. And it's okay that I may not overcome that challenge as fast as I want to, right? But it's the working on it that is the honesty about it. If you're lying to yourself and say, oh, I'm busy, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, right? When you're really not, and you're not, you're missing out on a great opportunity for growth. And dude, it's a struggle every day. It's a struggle every day. We all face it, and I'm hoping that I just get better and better at it every day, because I think it provides happiness beyond what I think we can imagine. Knowing that yourself as much as you can, and be happy with yourself, and that's probably the biggest key. I think, Jessy, is if you could be truly happy with yourself, happy with how you look and how you act and how you sound, and all the things, right? And being happy doesn't mean you enjoy them, right? Or you wish you could change them. Of course not. But you just know that's you. Boy, it'd be a nice world to live in if we all could do that. And so that's what I continue to grow on and work on every day.
That's wonderful to be just happy about, after fully accepting oneself, right? That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And that's so powerful. Where do
Mm.
you feel most tested right now? Like what challenges are stretching you the most in leadership and in life?
It's a great question. As your organization, as my organization has grown, right? And as you start taking off multiple hats, right? When you start an organization, you're wearing all the hats, right? You're solving all the problems. As you start taking off these hats, because leadership and your organization is evolving and it's getting bigger and more people are involved and less hats come off your head, which is great. That's what you want. The problem with that is, as a leader, especially someone that's busy and likes to be busy and likes to grow, especially with their passion, it's hard to remember that need in your organization does not equate to value. And that's a hard lesson to learn, because when you're really, really needed, you feel very, very valued, which is great. But as an organization grows, right, your broad need, I should say, is far less. I'm not a marketer person, so I don't have to market anymore, right? I'm not an accountant, so I don't have to go in the books. We have people that do that, right? All of these needs that the corporation needed from you is being lifted, which is awesome. But the challenge you have, and it's part of founder syndrome. It's part of the evolution of my leadership role, as well as the evolution of the organization. You just are far less needed in more of a general way. Your need now is very specific, right? It becomes more specific. And this happens with every organization. And it's hard to realize that lack of need does not equate to lack of value.
So this last question is more of an invitation. You have the time and space here to offer to our listeners whatever it is that's top of the mind for you. Anything at all. Take your time. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I've been dying to tell you, I love your name, Jessy James. When I first saw that on email, I'm like, oh my gosh. Growing up, that was one of my favorite shows.
Oh,
Did you ever see it?
No, I haven't.
You got to go see it. It's a bad guy, good guy story where they're trying to save the town from the evil train company going through and robbing. It's a great story. You'd love it. I don't know if it's a true story, but anyways, I just saw your name and I'm like, Jessy James. That's a household name in my house growing up.
It is. It truly is.
Listen, the biggest advocate I am that I'd like to share with your audience is the two things, really. The child bedlessness. It's not even a real word, but it's a real problem. And your audience might not understand what I mean. Of course they don't. I didn't when I first stumbled upon it. Greater than 3% of the total population in your town right now on average represents kids sleeping on the floor. So if you're in a town of 100,000 people, there's 3,000 kids that don't have a bed. And if you stop and think about what is it like? What does it mean to be a child? Well, anybody really, but a child that didn't have a bed. When these kids grow up or wake up rather, they didn't sleep well. They're probably sore, probably in a bad mood. They go to school. They're not ready to learn like the other kids. They don't have a chance to make great friends. These are all, even physical things that affect these children. And then mentally, right? When these kids, they can't have sleepovers. They don't have a bed in their room. So their friends don't come over. They're embarrassed by it. And so they go to their friends' house, right, to play. And, little Johnny not only has a bed, he's got throw pillows, right? What kind of message does it send to these kids, right? And worse yet, Jessy, when you and I have a bad day at work or heaven forbid, we're sick, we got the flu or whatever. Tell me, what is the one place on the planet that we all just can't wait to crawl into at the end of the day, right? It's our bed. It's our sanctuary. I speak all over the country and I stay in some really nice, comfortable beds, but I promise you there's not one I'd rather stay in more than my own, right? And it has nothing to do with comfort. It has everything to do with my sanctuary. It's mine. It's my personal place. And these kids don't have that. And it's bigger and more uglier and hairier than people realize. Right now, as you and I talk, there's 150,000 kids on our waiting list. And to put the nail in the coffin with that, We only cover about less than 30% of the whole United States. 150,000, only 30%. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to realize how many kids out there are in need. And Sleep in Heavenly Peace, shbbeds.org, is a way that people can find out what's going on locally, find out how to get involved, how to donate, how to even start your own chapter, and best yet, how to apply for a child in need that's either for yourself, your neighbor, or your friend 5 states over, right? We need to find these kids. They're in these situations not because of their choices, because of someone else's, or sometimes just because of bad situations. You know, child bedlessness, it doesn't really know economics. It doesn't know culture or geography or race or religion or politics. It doesn't care about that. It just knows hardship and heartache, you know, and these kids suffer from it. And Sleep in Heavenly Peace, we're the largest bed building charity in the world, which sounds big and awesome, which, I mean, it is, but it's really because there's not very many. It's just such an unknown problem. So the least I could ask your audience to do is just help me raise awareness about how serious and how bad child bedlessness is. Take some time to find out how bad it is in your own community. You're going to be extremely surprised, right? And I think the second thing that I'd share just briefly is, if you're a founder out there struggling with, you know, how do I fit in my own organization? I feel like I'm losing passion? I'm losing, you know, quote, control or participation in my own organization. If you're struggling with that, you know, what you're going through is called founder syndrome. Everybody goes through it, right? You don't know it, but there is ways to work through it and work with it and find that happy place that we used to live in. Because it's a challenge. You know, people can find me on social media, on LinkedIn. I mean, type in Luke Mickelson. I promise you're going to find me. I'd love to help out. You know, I teach a class called the Founder Syndrome Survival Course, where we share ideas about how we get through this together, and things that you can do, some disciplines I teach you that have helped me and hopefully will help you get through some of that stuff. So those are the two things I hope your listeners can resonate with and can help us help founders, but help kids more.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Luke. And that's a powerful message. And I do hope listeners are, you know, who are listening, get curious about you and find ways to help and support. I really appreciate the wisdom that you shared here, the wealth of wisdom that you shared here today with me and our listeners. I got a lot out of this conversation, and I'm sure whoever's listening would have equally benefited from this conversation. You know, I felt like I had goosebumps at so many points as I heard your story. So thank you so much for being on the True Leadership Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. And Jessy, thanks for having a podcast. I know you make $1 million doing this, right? You know, or you spend more like you spend a lot of money. Listen, podcasters should need to be highlighted because you provide a platform for people to hear stories like this, information, you know, have awareness raised to them about issues that they may not know about. It wouldn't happen if we didn't have you guys. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's our purpose, to elevate the voice of leaders, you know, and explore their understanding of true leadership and their journey. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.